The Second World War, a podcast by Stephen Bedard.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/hopesreason. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. We could put a start to the Second World War at a number of places. We could see it as Japan's invasion of Manchuria, or Germany's annexation of Austria. However, it's generally understood as starting with Germany's invasion of Poland. While warfare had already been underway, it was this event that brought the world into the World War. Let's begin with some background on Poland. For all of the 19th century, Poland was not an independent or unified country. But then came along the First World War. The Allied victory opened the door for a redrawing of the map of Europe. American President Woodrow Wilson had, as the 13th of his 14 points, the reconstitution of Poland. Thus was born, after the armistice, the Second Polish Republic. They did pretty well for themselves, even fighting a war with and defeating the Soviet Union in 1919 to 1921. This helped to stem the flow of communism into Europe. Poland had the typical highs and lows of European countries at that time, but things were looking bright. With the Munich Agreement of 1938, Poland received a portion of Czechoslovakia that they had long desired. Not bad. In 20 years, they went from not being a nation to already expanding their territory. But this wouldn't last long. A point of contention was the status of the city of Danzig, also known as Gdansk. Danzig was a city-state that included many towns, and more importantly, a port on the Baltic Sea. Danzig was not considered to be a part of Germany or Poland, and was under the protection of the League of Nations. Hitler wanted Danzig. Hitler offered an alliance with Poland, but by no means an equal alliance. Don't think in terms of Germany's relationship with Italy or Japan. Poland would be completely subservient to Germany. Oh, and they would also have to recognize the incorporation of Danzig into the Reich. The Polish government was understandably concerned. Britain issued a guarantee of Poland's independence on the 31st of March, 1939. Hitler responded by revoking the German-Polish non-aggression pact. Not long after, the German-Soviet non-aggression pact was created that divided up Europe according to the spheres of influence. That line went down the middle of Poland. This would be a problem for the Polish people. Hitler had a history of navigating the threats of other European powers by providing excuses for his aggression. The same would be true for Poland. Instead of simply invading, Hitler created a source of provocation. A number of staged events along the border were put on to show that Germany was only defending itself. The most famous being the Gleiwitz incident, which took place on the 31st of August, 1939. This was an SS attack on a German radio station with the operatives dressed as Polish nationals. Thus, Germany was forced to protect itself. Remarkably, Germany invaded Poland with a fully prepared and equipped army and air force. Amazing how quickly they were able to get themselves together. It should be noted that Germany and Poland had been in talks about how to deal with the Danzig corridor. Poland was still waiting for Germany's next set of proposals for a peaceful solution when the invasion began. The Polish army never had a chance. Militarily, they were at World War I levels, while Germany had advanced through their experience in Spain. They had developed the Blitzkrieg. This included rapid advances of panzers rather than the traditional way of using tanks to support infantry, dive bombing of strategic targets, and aerial bombing of civilian targets. Germany sent 5 armies into Poland. Worse than that, they also sent in special units to terrorize and murder civilians. Poland was different than what had happened with Austria and Czechoslovakia. Those two events were part of Hitler's plan to expand the Reich by uniting the German peoples of other nations. Hitler saw no value in the Polish people, only in the Polish land. Poland was needed for Hitler's concept of living space, land for the German people to expand into. It was not enough for the Polish military to be destroyed. Many of the civilians would have to go as well. The Polish troops fought bravely, but they were completely overwhelmed. They were hopelessly ill-equipped, most of their weapons obsolete. That is, for those who had weapons. If anyone doubts their courage or ability, however, they should look at the exploits of the Polish troops who escaped and who fought in later battles against the Germans elsewhere in Europe. Unlike the situation in Czechoslovakia, Britain and France were not willing to appease. They said they would support Poland, and they did so by declaring war on the 3rd of September. This gave the Polish people hope, as all they had to do was to continue the fight while Britain and France invaded Germany from the west. Soon the Nazi threat would be extinguished forever. Except that was not going to happen. While Britain and France were morally supportive of Poland, they were not prepared militarily to intervene. The policy of appeasement had left both countries ill-prepared to launch a major military campaign. On the 12th of September, France concluded that the Poles had lost, and there was no point to send military assistance to their fight. All of that would have been bad enough, but it got worse. As Germany invaded from the west, the plan was for the Soviets to invade from the east. But the Soviets delayed to see how the Poles fared against the Germans. Remember that the Soviets had lost to the Poles just a couple of decades previously. On the 17th of September, the Soviet army invaded Poland. Like the Germans, the Soviets attempted to justify the invasion as needed for national security. Poland must have been pretty tough to be a threat to both Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. The Soviet troops moved in to occupy the areas that they had been assigned with their agreement with Germany. Warsaw held out for some time, stubbornly resisting even though it was a lost cause. Eventually, Warsaw was bombed into submission. Polish troops and ships escaped to carry on the fight in the future. Other Poles continued to fight through resistance. The German occupation of Poland was brutal, literally. It is estimated that between 5.5 and 6 million Poles died during the occupation. Many of the Poles who died were Jewish. They were segregated into ghettos and eventually sent to concentration camps. It was not just the Jews who were killed. The Nazis also targeted the intelligentsia and Catholic priests. Many other groups were victims of Nazi brutality. What happened in Poland was not so much a military occupation as an exercise in the depths of which humanity can sink. Ironically, they attempted to dehumanize their victims, but in so doing, they lost their own humanity. How much of a gamble was the invasion of Poland for Hitler? After all, he knew that Britain and France had pledged their support to Poland, and they had beaten Germany just 2 decades before. But things had changed. Britain's air force and army couldn't compare to Germany's current levels. Plus, they had to commit certain forces to the Far East in the face of the Japanese threat. Hitler had concluded, quote, "It seems to me impossible that any responsible British statesman dare, under these conditions, accept the risk of open warfare." France also had severe limitations. Their army, both in terms of numbers and quality of armaments, was no match for Germany. They had thrown all their eggs in the basket of the Maginot Line, fortifications along the French-German border built between 1930 and 1939. The French had expected a German attack as they watched the rearmament and the breaking of the Treaty of Versailles. The Germans had built their own set of fortifications, the Siegfried Line, on their side of the border. The French would not be able to break that line, and France's only option would be to invade Germany through a neutral country, something Hitler knew France wouldn't do. Britain and France's only option would be to blockade Germany, but even that would be less successful because of the non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union. As Hitler was looking toward the invasion of Poland, he made this comment, quote, "I have struck from the hands of the West the weapon which Soviet help would have given them. the possibility now exists of inflicting a mortal blow on Poland. Hitler was no fool. He understood that if Britain and France had accepted an alliance with the Soviets, that they would have had what they needed to stop Hitler's plans. But they rejected that alliance, leaving the opportunity for Hitler to make a deal with Stalin, as distasteful as it was for him personally. So what happened with the Allies? On September 3rd, both Britain and France declared war on Germany. In the week that followed, Australia, New Zealand, Nepal, South Africa, Bahrain, Canada, and Oman declared war on Germany. As a Canadian, I find it interesting that Nepal declared war even before Canada. However, these declarations of war could be nothing more than statements of intent. There was nothing that could be done to save Poland, nor could they attack Germany. Britain and France and their allies had not prepared for war on the same scale as Germany. The Second World War had begun, but it's not what people had expected. After the occupation of Poland by the Germans and Soviets, there was not much that could be done. It was a time of preparation. It was also a time for Britain and France to relearn warfare in a new age. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Second World War podcast. For you, the listeners of the Second World War podcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. My recommended audiobook is The Nazi Invasion of Poland, the history of the campaign that started World War II. The object of the war is to physically destroy the enemy. That is why I have prepared for the moment only in the East, my death's head formations with orders to kill without pity or mercy all men, women, and children of Polish descent or language. Only in this way can we obtain the living space we need. So spoke Hitler in August of 1939. Throughout 1938 and 1939, conflict broke out across Europe after the social and economic disorder brought about by World War I helped the Nazis to rise to power in Germany. In 1937, Adolf Hitler declared the Treaty of Versailles void and began aggressively annexing parts of the European continent. Europe's attempts to appease him, most notably at Munich in 1938, failed as Nazi Germany swallowed up Austria and Czechoslovakia by 1939. Italy was on the march as well, invading Albania in April of 1939. The straw that broke the camel's back, however, was Germany's invasion of Poland on September 1st of that year. 2 days later, France and Great Britain declared war on Germany, and World War II began in earnest. Of course, as most people now know, the invasion of Poland was merely the preface to the Nazi blitzkrieg of most of Western Europe, which would include Denmark, Belgium, and France by the summer of 1940. The resistance put up by these countries is often portrayed as weak, and the narrative is that the British stood alone in 1940 against the Nazi onslaught, defending the British Isles during the Battle of Britain and preventing a potential German invasion. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/hopesreason. Again, that's audibletrial.com/hopesreason for your free audiobook. To find both blog posts and other episodes of the podcast, please visit me at stephenjbedard.com/Second World War. And please consider supporting me at patreon.com/hopesreason. Thank you, and God bless.